This is the Brisbane Lions Fancast with Dom Fay and Michael Whiting.
Well, another week, and we're sitting here this week quite happy. You never quite can predict how it's going to go this season, Mike, but another great performance on Saturday night against North Melbourne. Quite a bounce back after the Freo game.
Yeah, amazing bounce back, wasn't it, as you said? And, well, I certainly can't predict them, that's for sure, because I thought North Melbourne had run away against the Lions, but they proved me wrong in a massive way. So, enormous turnaround of events from the previous week when we were here bemoaning a record low inside 50s and where was the hope coming from, and it was... And we're back on top with, plenty of hope, looking forward to the last 8 weeks of the season.
Well, every week that you do rock up to the studio and we have a chat before we start recording, and, we'll always chat briefly about the game. And I remember last week I was saying something like, we are really a rabble right now. Like, this is not in a good place. We're not going to have a positive few years to come. There's going to be a lot of change needed to get this club right. And now we sit here this week thinking, well, maybe it's not that dire at all. Maybe there is, a light not far away at all.
We're all probably guilty of it. We all tend to overreact a bit, don't we? We're pretty high, we're pretty low. And that's one thing Lepper said through most of the year, you don't get too high and you don't get too low. So internally, obviously, they're not, weren't sort of too perturbed or put off by the Freo result, because what we saw on Saturday night was great. We saw that second quarter again. We've seen 3 or 4 glimpses of it this year, that run and carry, and Pierce Hanley was back to his best, and we saw the Mosquito fleet again with Taylor Green and Zorko running right in that second quarter, and James Aish, and we saw all this outside run and spread, and it was so exciting and got a bit nerve-wracking towards the end, but just the good play was, the best is so good, and you can plenty of encouragement there for not only the players but the fans and supporters as well. Yeah,
well, that second quarter was as good as any footy we've played this year. There've been a few, our wins have come from exceptional quarters, really.
Just amazing similarity with a lot of the wins, isn't there?
Yeah. Instead of, we haven't had any, I suppose, hard-fought-out wins, like, for example, the Essendon game last season. They've all been kind of one quarter we've piled on a bunch of goals and held on. That's kind of how we've won this year.
Yeah, a little bit of heart attack stuff for Lepic and the coaching crew, isn't it? And to cling on in that last quarter with the ball camped in the defensive 50 for the last 10 minutes was plenty of nerve-wracking moments there.
And I reckon the most relieved man in Australia this week has been Daniel McStay.
Oh, didn't we? I think everyone was just going, oh no.
Well, I was saying I was with my friends I go to the games with, and I'm like, why is McStay taking the kick out at this stage of the game?
That's probably the question they have to answer.
Most.
Yeah.
I know McGrath went over to take it off him, but the umpire said no, it's, it has to be him now for some reason. So anyway, thankfully it all worked out in the end, and there's a number of key contributors that we should briefly touch on. Stephen Martin, again, for me, was unbelievably good. I mean, I remember when he came back into the side for the Bulldogs game, one of us, maybe we were just chatting, and there was a throwaway line said that, well, maybe this is his chance to say, hey, I should stay at the Lions, I should be able to save my career. But I wouldn't have said either of us genuinely thought that he's the kind of guy who would be pushing for a new contract, but now you'd think he's a lock for a new one. Yeah,
it's amazing what 1 month can do. He's gone up against 4 of the biggest and best ruckmen in the league in over 4 weeks, and he hasn't just cut even. He's beaten a couple of those guys. He's had Minson, Mumford, Sandilands, and Goldstein. I mean, they're huge men, and he's taken them all on. We all know that he's athletic and that he's good at ground level and whatever, but just with the lack of continuity and background he's had over the last few years with his unreliable body, his soft tissue injuries all over the place, you just wondered whether he'd be able to do it. But thrown straight into the number 1 ruck role, having to do so much of the work, and he's just thrived on it, hasn't he? I think the interesting thing is going to be when Matty Leuenberger comes back in a couple of weeks, once he's got a few more reserves matches under his belt, just how that combination's going to work, because Martin thrives on being the number 1 man.
Yeah, he absolutely does. And I think if you look at his form at the Demons, that was very similar there too.
Yeah, right.
His best footy he ever played at Melbourne was when their ruckman, I can't remember who it was at the time.
It was Jamar. Yeah.
Jamar, right. Yeah, when Jamar went down and Martin filled in for the majority of the year, and he had an outstanding year. So it shows that him in that number 1 ruck role is just, he's one of the best ruckmen in the competition, really, which, considering the price we got him for, is a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, well, we almost got him for nothing, really, which probably looked a good thing about a month ago, because he'd hardly played any footy, but he's not only just he's not only been given his chance, but he's just taken hold of it, and he's been a really influential player in a couple of victories in that time for the Lions over that past month. So all credit to him, because I think most people would have thought, oh, he's got an opportunity, but didn't hold out much hope for what he could produce. But, full credit to Steph Martin. It's been an incredible past month.
Absolutely. I think one of the lines that one of us did say actually was that, the last time that we had to rely on a third-string ruckman was Mitch Clarke in 2009 when Charman and Louis went down, and could he do the same thing that Mitch Clarke did and, really stand up like Clarke did that season. Again, said really out of hope more than anything, but he's doing it, and I think he absolutely needs to be commended for that, and I think he's one you'll now be very likely to see at the club again next season.
Yeah, I think so. And when Matty Leuenberger does come back in, or I guess it gives the Lions the luxury of being able to nurse him back through the reserves and make sure he's got enough game time in his legs before they bring him back. But they're going to have to make it work somehow, because Stefan Martin obviously still deserves his spot in the team, and Matthew Leuenberger is the number one man and one of the best players at the club. So somehow they're going to have to make it work, but I guess that's a good headache for the Lions to have, which they haven't had a lot of those good headaches throughout the season.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few others worth touching on. I thought Joel Patfull was outstanding as always. We seem to play well when he plays well. Has been a bit of a trend. Rowan Buick's another one who he was great against the Bulldogs, a bit down against Freo, a bit down against GWS, but came back out on the weekend and was instrumental off the half back line, more of a player than probably most of us thought he could ever be.
Terrific. He just runs, sorry, Dom there, he just sort of he's worked both ways now, hasn't he? Because when Brent Harvey went forward of centre, Rowan Buick picked him up and kept Boomer pretty quiet. I know Boomer got a bit of the ball, but he didn't have as much influence. I mean, for North Melbourne to do well, Boomer's normally in their top 2 or 3 players, and he certainly wasn't that the other night, largely thanks to Rowan Buick. And then Rowan Buick can run the other way and was quite influential with the ball. So he was terrific. He's just been given that space up and down the wing, and he's made the most of his chance back in the team, just like Steph Martin.
Yeah, and Pierce Hanley's second quarter.
Just enormous, wasn't he? Just great to see him run and carry.
I was very grateful in that moment. We have him for 5 years, basically, because, I mean, as the shocking stat kind of came out in the match, he had, I think, more metres gained in that second quarter than any other player did for the whole game, which is just unbelievable.
Yeah, it was a staggering second quarter from Pierce. He's had I don't think he would disagree with this. He's had a very ordinary first half of the year, and he just started to show a few signs prior to his downer against Freo. But the previous couple of weeks, he'd worked hard. He'd got a bit more of the ball. He'd made a few more tackles. He just started to work his way in after a really disappointing first half of the year, but that was his standout on a Saturday night.
Yeah, Aish was also outstanding. Terrific. And one that we need to, really, Peter Schwab, get to James Aish now. 10 years, I don't care. 10 years, just sign him up now.
I think they're onto that. But yeah, for me, Pierce and James Aish were the 2 best players on the field. So terrific contribution from him again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was just great to see them do it for Brownie. I don't know, if that was completely the focus, but no doubt it would have been in their minds. And I have to say, sitting up in section 41 where I sit every week and seeing Brown walk out to the players afterwards, I did get a bit emotional. It was really touching, that moment where he ran out and they all embraced him. It was it was one of the more special footy moments I think I've witnessed.
Yeah, it was great. And people can say what they like about milestone games and tribute games or whatever, but there's no doubt the Lions got up for John O'Brien. They might not all say it, but I think in the back of their heads they did, because the intensity straight from the start of that match against North Melbourne. I know it took the Lions a while to score. I know it took them a while. Their ball movement was poor in the first quarter, but their tackle intensity and their commitment at the contest was on the go straight from the first bounce. And they were able to take advantage in the second quarter with a few more scores. But they were intense, and they played the full 4 quarters. And I think that had to do something to do with Brownie for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So we move on to the game against Richmond at the MCG this Saturday afternoon. And honestly, though, I think this is, like at the start of the year, you would have looked at this game and thought, well, Richmond, probably we're not going to beat them down there considering how people thought they would go. But, if we win this, we overtake them on the ladder.
We do. They've had a very difficult season, which has been well documented. We played them earlier in the season on the Easter Thursday match. Brisbane played very, very poorly that night, yet still with about 10 or 15 minutes of good footy hit the front during the third quarter. So I know the teams have changed significantly since then, and the news on Tuesday, the day that we've recorded this, that Jack Redden's got a hot spot in his foot and that he needs to have scans to confirm that. So unlikely to play for a little while. So he's a big loss. So the teams have changed, but Brisbane have to go down there with enormous confidence. After they beat Carlton here a month ago, they went down to Melbourne and did very well and beat the Western Bulldogs. So you hope that's the sort of flow-on effect from this North Melbourne result. Yeah,
and also looking at our form at the Gabba throughout the season, as well as Richmond's early season form, you would have thought, looking back, we probably should have beaten them at the Gabba earlier in the season. So maybe this is the chance to get one back. And I mean, I think what Richmond have shown is that they can be scored against pretty quickly, and they may not, as bad as it sounds, they may not put up that much of a fight if we get on top of them.
You'd like to think that. I guess we don't know, but it's there's a real cluster of teams down the bottom, isn't there? There's about 4 or 5 or 6 teams within a win of each other, and when you play each other, it's just nice to try and free yourself of that clutch of teams. And if the Lions can get a couple more wins, all of a sudden you've got 6 or 7 wins for the season, and you have a bit of hope going into 2015 with Rich coming back and a fully fit Leuenberger, and another year into Aish and Taylor, and all of a sudden there's a lot more hope rather than if you sort of peter out the last sort of 6 or 8 weeks without any more victories. So it's a huge match and a chance at the MCG, which are few and far between. So can't wait for it, actually. I think it'll be a great contest.
Yeah, look, I would take 2 more wins this year over the number 1 draft pick any day of the week. I think if you look at the successful clubs over the past 10, 15 years, they're built off winning cultures, not off high draft picks.
Exactly, and it's great. And it was great to see that turnaround from the Fremantle performance for that exact reason. The players are still obviously up. They're still keen. They still want to win. The losses this year haven't affected their psyche. They're still going at every contest thinking they can win. So that's a great attitude, and it's something that's going to take a while to instill. But it's obviously rubbing off Justin Leppich's attitude and culture.
Absolutely, and someone who has been pretty instrumental in that in his recent form is defender Justin Clarke, and we'll be chatting to him next on the Fancast.
The Brisbane Lions official club app lets you have all your Lions content in the palm of your hand. News, videos, scores, stats, player profiles and more. And it's free. Plus, if you're a Telstra NextG customer, it's unmetered, so there's no data charges. The Brisbane Lions app available right now for both iPhone and Android.
Joining us on the Fancast this week, he was our first ever guest on the first ever Fancast. That was just before, I believe, he'd been upgraded to the senior list. Now, a year and a half onwards, he is firmly entrenched as one of our key defenders. It's Justin Clarke. Thank you very much for joining the show, Justin.
No worries, mate. It's good to be back.
So the mood must be pretty good around the camp after a great win on Saturday night.
Yeah, obviously, it's a lot better than when you lose. It's certainly come as a bit of a shot in the arm for us, I guess. It can be a little bit tough when you lose a few games in a row or have a bit of a tough season to keep on soldiering on. So it's always really good to get a win, but we've been able to settle back down into the rhythm of the week and concentrate on Richmond this weekend.
You don't make it easy on your coach, do you? You just got out to a big lead, and again, you had to sort of hang on to the death there like you have a couple of times.
Yeah, for old left and Brownie as well. It's pretty funny, this footage. Yeah, I feel a bit sorry for him. It was a bit similar on the ground, but talking to everybody that was watching, it was a bit of a strain on their hearts, I guess.
What came out of the review for you guys? Was it a pretty positive one, or was it, we did the second quarter well but need to fix up a lot the rest of the game? What was the main points to take out of the review?
I guess the second quarter was a good showcase for what we want to do with our footy. It's just consistently getting that and identifying areas where we can improve in the different quarters that will enable us to do that. So longer periods and more consistent efforts. As well, the defence aspect of the game, which is something that we're always working on and is a massive part of the game, is something that was looked at, and it was done pretty well for the night, but there's always little areas of improvement that you can always keep on tinkering with to try and achieve the perfect game, which is obviously an impossible thing, but you want to keep working and driving yourselves towards that because that's how you're going to be able to compete on the big stage against the big teams.
Justin, I think about 3 of your wins this year have been very similar. The one on Saturday night and also St Kilda and Western Bulldogs, where you've had a really good second quarter, you've got out to a bit of a lead, and then you have had to hang on. Is that just because you're sort of trying to protect the lead and not playing that adventurous style of footy, or is it just that the opposition's lifting, or is there anything you've been able to put that down to or identify?
Yeah, well, we haven't really identified it, or I guess for my way of thinking, it would be a little bit of that. You go back into your shell a bit. You lose that edge that you're playing to keep the lead rather than playing to win. I guess that's just my personal opinion, and thinking about the mindset behind it. I guess we play so much better when we're really adventurous with our ball movement, and that's the key for us to be able to close out games, I think.
Do you think fatigue's playing much of a role in that? Obviously, it is still a pretty young group. So do you think fatigue is part of the reason why perhaps you're trailing off towards the end of games a bit?
I don't think so. I think it's more just it's more of a mental thing rather than a physical thing. We're well prepared by a high performance team with Bert's at the helm. I don't think that's an excuse that we can really give ourselves. I think it's just a mental strength to be able to close out quarters and be able to compete well in red time is something that we need to keep on working on.
Can you tell us what it was like in the last 10 minutes the other night, Justin? The ball was pretty much camped in North Melbourne's forward 50 and your defensive 50. Do you feel that pressure? Did it feel like they were going to overrun you? And did you realise that, one mistake could have led to you guys losing the game?
Yeah, well, when the ball is camped in your 50, you definitely feel the pressure. It's something that, I guess, when you got the game on the line, you've got to just hang on. And you're very conscious of everything that you do can have a direct consequence on the outcome of the game, probably more so than other times in the game for obvious reasons. And as for the mistakes, it was interesting that we were able to make a few mistakes and be able to recover. For example, the Goose incident, the Dan McStay incident. But we had enough character to be able to recover from that and repel the repeated attacks.
Has there been a bit of joking around with Dan McStay this week, or have you all given that a wide berth?
You always have a little chuckle about it, but no, you don't prod too hard.
Yeah, it was, I guess, all's well that ends well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly right.
Justin, can we get you to talk about your own form a little bit? The first sort of 6 or 7 weeks in particular looked like you were struggling, whether that was form or confidence or whatever. How have you been able to turn it around in sort of the last sort of couple of months, do you think?
I guess it was a good understanding of Leper's game plan. I had a little bit of an interrupted pre-season with my shoulder and a few little niggly groin issues. But we were able to kind of, once I figured out and understood what Leper was after with our game plan and the structures that we were after, it enabled me to have confidence in what I was meant to be doing, and so that enabled me to have greater assurance in what I was meant to do and have a little bit more leadership with those around me, and I guess that helps me take my game to a better level. And
obviously, the new senior coach at the club probably isn't that new anymore, but the senior coach in Leper is one of the best key defenders of the last, decade or two. What's he been like personally for you as a coach in terms of passing on his knowledge of playing the role?
Yeah, awesome. It's certainly something pretty special to be able to learn off one of the best defenders. Little tips, body positioning, little things that might annoy opponents, and starting points, and the emphasis on that and the impact that can have is something that makes a huge difference in the way that you play. And talking about the reason that I've been able to kind of have a okay last couple of months is due to that. I think it's that continual exposure to the little nuances that you can use to your benefit, and it certainly makes a huge difference in my development.
And what does it do for your confidence, the fact that Leper's, he's got the confidence in you to put you on the opposition's best or second best forward? We've seen Dan Merritt go to the forward line and Goose Maguire's come back in, but quite often you're sort of the man taking the number one key forward. How has that sort of settled with you?
I always enjoy a challenge, and I think it's a bit of a nod that I'm going okay to be able to take on those blokes. It's certainly something that I really enjoy when, I might get told earlier in the week, there's the bloke that you're matching up on, and you go, righto, awesome, bring it on. And that's the side of things that I really enjoy, having that opportunity to match it with the best and see how you go.
Well, just looking ahead before we let you go then to this weekend's game, obviously against Richmond. Now, I mean, obviously you can never really think this too much as a team. You've got to always take each side on its own merits. But, they are a side who are, I suppose, ripe for the picking, really. I mean, they are beatable at the moment. Is that in your consciousness at all, or are you, just treating this like any other game?
You can pull out all sorts of cliches here, couldn't you?
What are you thinking, Justin?
Obviously, they're a team that play, well, because Lepers came from Richmond. They've got some similarities in their game style that mean that they're a good matchup for us to test what we want to do against what they want to do. And so it should be a really interesting game for us. I'll go into every game thinking that we're going to win, no matter who it's against. I was really confident coming into the North Melbourne game when pretty much everybody had written us off. So I think you've got to go into every game thinking that you're going to win and go from there.
And sorry, mate, I was just going to throw one last one in. So just on your own duel, if you match up on either Jack Riewoldt or Vickery or whoever, I guess if you get given Jack, what would you think of that matchup?
Again, it's a awesome opportunity to test yourself against one of the best key forwards in the competition, and it's something that I watch his tapes and do my research into how he likes to play and go from there and really attack the challenge.
I'll throw one quick last one too then. The MCG obviously is a ground that you, as in your second year of senior footy now, wouldn't have been able to play at too many times. I wouldn't have thought. Is it always an honour and always really exciting to be able to play on really the home of footy?
Yeah, absolutely. Mum and Dad keyed this one in a little while ago to say, right, I want to go watch my kid play footy on the MCG. So it's certainly something that you look forward to. Last year, my one and only game there, I did my shoulder last year, so it'd be interesting to return against Richmond as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And it's always certainly something that you dream of as a kid to be able to play on the MCG.
Well, we love having you on the show, and all the best for the game on Saturday. Thank you very much, Justin Clarke.
Cheers, thank you very much.
The reserves this week play the UWS Giants at Spotless Stadium down in Sydney at 10:30am on Saturday. And then the seniors take to the MCG against Richmond. It's 1:45 in the afternoon. I'm flying down for it, as I mentioned a bit earlier on. I'm pretty excited for this match, Mike. Just before we get to giving our tips or anything, though, we should briefly touch on the sad news about Brent Staker, who looks like he's going to miss the rest of this season as well. He can't get much luck injury-wise lately.
Poor Stakes. You really feel sorry for him. He's such a great fella and just hasn't had a decent crack at it in the last... This is four seasons. I mean, he had a fairly good run in 2013, and we saw what he could do there as a key forward and a guy that can play back as well. But another stress fracture for him just when he was about to play his first game this weekend at reserves level. Horrible timing, horrible luck, and I think everyone's got their fingers crossed that Stakes can get over this one, go through rehab one more time and have another crack next year, because we'd all just love to see him get a chance, an opportunity to get back on the field and show what he can do.
Absolutely, and in the meantime, all his energy's into Footy Fix, which will be good for the viewers.
That other show on Lions TV,
yeah. So on to the match then. Look, I tipped the Lions last week more out of hope and, because it was the Brownie factor and everything like that. But this week I genuinely am tipping the Lions, and that's, I believe, out of a rational viewpoint that I think we are actually a chance of winning.
I love the way you're wording this stuff.
I'm trying to justify
Last week was irrational. This week is rational.
Well, I think we're a chance, and I think we'll get over the top of Richmond by about 3-4 goals in the end.
Well, often if I've tipped against the Lions in these 50-50s, they've won. So maybe I'll use that as my justification here. But they're an understatement. They're two very evenly matched teams. Their positions on the ladder say that. I think Richmond at home might just do enough. Jack Redden's loss, I think, is really big for Brisbane. They'll have to bring in another midfielder of lesser ability than Jack, I would say. I think that's a big loss. And I don't know, Richmond only I guess Richmond are coming off a win against St Kilda, Brisbane off North Melbourne, so draw what you like out of that. But I think Richmond might just get over the top. But Brisbane should be right in this up to their necks for, right to the finish.
Absolutely. We'll be back next week to review that game. Until then, this is the Fancast. Bye.
Bye.